This is Learning with Coach History. All right, this is the sixth lesson in conservatism, foreign policy under Reagan and Bush. Your vocab: apartheid, Tiananmen Square, Sandinistas, Contras, and Operation Desert Storm. The South African government mandated apartheid for decades. Apartheid gave the minority white population special privileges, while non-whites were kept from good jobs, schools, and housing. They could not vote, own land, or travel freely. President Reagan's position was not to intervene. Some saw his policy as helpful to the white regime. Then in 1986, Congress overrode a veto by Reagan and imposed trade limits and sanctions on South Africa. When Bush became president, he supported these sanctions. Eventually, apartheid ended. In 1994, South Africa had a new constitution and democratic elections. Students in China demanded freedom of speech. In April of 1889, protesters held marches to voice their demands. The marches grew into large demonstrations in Beijing's Tiananmen Square. The Chinese military crushed the protesters. Soldiers killed hundreds of them and arrested others. People all over the world watched these actions. The US and other nations condemned the actions of the Chinese government and imposed economic sanctions. President Bush was criticized, however, for meeting with the government. People said that he was more interested in economics than in human rights. The pro-democracy movement had collapsed in China. In 1979, Sandinista rebels overthrew the Nicaraguan government. President Carter sent aid, as did the Soviet Union and Cuba. In 1981, President Reagan charged that the Sandinista government was communist. He supported the Contras, a group trying to defeat the Sandinistas. After years of conflict, a peace agreement was signed and free elections were held in 1990. Reagan sent U.S. troops to Grenada in 1983. He feared its government had ties to Cuba. The U.S. troops overthrew the pro-Cuban government. They set up a pro-America government in its place. In 1989, President Bush sent more than 20,000 U.S. troops to Panama. He wanted to overthrow Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega, Noriega. He also wanted to arrest him for drug trafficking. Noriega was taken by the American military. They took him to Miami. He was tried, convicted, and sentenced to 40 years in prison. In 1983, terrorists linked to Iran took some Americans hostage in Lebanon. Reagan condemned Iran. He called on U.S. allies not to sell Iran weapons for its war against Iraq. 3 years later, the American people found out that Reagan was breaking his own policy. He had approved the sale of arms to Iran in hopes that Iran would free the hostages in Lebanon. Also, some of the profits from the sale were sent to the Contras in Nicaragua. These illegal activities were called the IranContra scandal. In the summer of 1987, Congress investigated IranContra. Some of Reagan's staff were convicted of crimes in the scandal. In 1993, President Bush pardoned some of these people. In 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. On January 16th of 91, with the support of Congress and the United Nations, President Bush launched Operation Desert Storm to fight Iraq and to free Kuwait. The United States and its allies staged air strikes against Iraq. On February 23rd, they also launched a ground attack. On February 28, President Bush announced a ceasefire. The Persian Gulf War was over. Kuwait was free.